So today we'll look at the emergence of the field of critical geopolitics. To start, we need to go to the very foundations of geography, to its founder, Eratosthenes. We know quite a lot about Eratosthenes' great innovations. We know that he developed his sieve, a means of identifying prime numbers. We know that he was the first person to measure the circumference of the Earth, and we know how he did it, and actually that his method was quite accurate. And we know that he founded the field of geography, or Earth description. But those works on geography were lost with the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. I'd always assumed that they were lost when Julius Caesar burned down the library, but recent work suggests that this was not the case, as I'll show in a moment. So, our second geographer is Strabo, who gets cited much more than Eratosthenes because his great work, Geographica, survived. In that work, he draws on the work of Eratosthenes, and we know that Strabo visited the Library of Alexandria around 20 BC, 28 years after Caesar burned it down. So it seems reasonable to assume that Eratosthenes' work was still there then. I'll revisit Strabo later in the course, as he has a lot of interesting things to say. For the most part, in the Anglosphere, critical geopolitics emerges in the 1990s, but that overlooks some key developments in geography in Japan in the 1960s and 70s, which we can look at later. Most English language writers acknowledge their debt to French geographer Yves Lacoste. In his 1976 work, geography is used, first of all, to make war. But what is critical geography? Mizuoka gives us a useful and revealing definition. Critical geography has a role of promoting universal justice in human life, in civil society, or in the ecological environment of our globalizing world. It should also tackle, with support from the critical theories of geography, actual problems more strongly and encourage people involved in resistance to solve problems and to transform the current neoliberalist globalism that finally degenerated into the illegitimate war of aggression on Iraq into that of the alternative, which guarantees everlasting peace and real freedom. Practical knowledge of the people in everyday life and the theoretical knowledge of critical social and economic geography should eventually be unified. Blimey. Now, think about that for a moment. The writers I presented in previous weeks have had a very singular view of what geography is. Geography was a means of measuring things like borders, distance, and power, and was used to understand war. This critical geography that Mizuoka is defining makes reference to justice, civil society, the environment, globalization, resistance, transformation, neoliberalism, an illegitimate war of aggression, peace, and freedom. These are not the words used by traditional geopolitical writers, unless they were in the context of geopolitics doesn't care about justice, or geopolitics doesn't care about civil society. Now, I'm not suggesting we should take Mizuoka's definition at face value. I have yet to see a meaningful definition of neoliberalism that distinguishes it from ordinary liberalism, and when it's coupled with globalism, I get concerned, as globalization has brought material benefit to many. To link neoliberalism with the invasion of Iraq is certainly problematic, and it's not clear what's meant by the alternative which guarantees everlasting peace and real freedom. What is this alternative, and how will it achieve everlasting peace? What does real freedom look like? But I think the biggest difference in all of this is that critical geography should encourage people involved in resistance. Now, whichever form of geography, or indeed the social sciences you come from, that's a radical departure. For most of us, the function of academic pursuit is to understand or to explain, to figure out why things are the way they are. Mizuoka's critical geography aims to change the world by supporting resistance movements. This presents enormous methodological and ethical issues for academics.